Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to be talking today about the PACE model. So, up till now, we've been talking a lot about what is inductive grammar, what is deductive grammar, and now we're going to actually see what it looks like in terms of classroom practice. As a reminder, we're talking about these core practices, specifically number 5, teaching grammar as a concept and using it in context. And I think you're going to actually see how a lot of these other ones actually kind of help us to be able to do this idea. So a reminder of what it does mean in terms of teaching grammar in concept as a concept in context. So choosing in terms of a theme, why they need to know this, focuses on the meaning of the words, and learners need to have experiences with both explicit and implicit, which is why I like this model specifically, because it's that idea of discovery learning. It's that mix of the two. And the things that we have to keep in mind. So we're not going to stop grammar. We're not doing grammar intensive courses, and we're not choosing one camp or the other. We're kind of looking to find that nice middle ground. So, just what we need in our field is another acronym. Acronyms are literally everywhere in this field. So this one is PACE. So we're going to be talking a lot about the PACE model. This is what you're going to end up doing for your final project. So it's a really, really important concept to understand. So PACE stands for presentation, attention, co-construction, and extension. And each one of these, they go in a specific order to spell the word PACE, and you have to do them in that order in order for it to really, really resonate with the students. It's also really important to notice that every single one of them, in my opinion, has the same value. It's not saying that presentation is more important than attention. I find that all 4 of them have that really, really strong value in what you're doing. Okay? So we're going to go through each step of what it actually means, and then we're going to look at some examples in a separate video. So the first one up is presentation. So we're going to be talking a lot about interpretive strategies, which is another one of the core practices. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to choose either a resource or we're going to write our own. And let me talk quick about this. So I usually go into these things thinking, okay, my unit is on health. I want to find health resources. I'm not going to throw an art resource in there when I'm in a health unit because that's a grammar lesson in disguise. Students are going to pick up, well, we've been talking about health. Why all of a sudden do we have something about art? Something's going to go off in their mind, right? So I'm going to look for a resource, and I'm going to look for one that talks about the theme I'm working with and has the grammar that I'm looking for. Quite frankly, that becomes really, really challenging. They exist, and when you find them, you want to save them forever. However, if I can't find a resource that has health vocabulary that I'm looking for and talks about the present perfect, after a while of searching, I give myself a 1 to 2 hour window of all right, time to stop searching. I'm okay with writing my own resource, whether I'm writing my own article, writing a story, whatever it is. So whether I'm writing that or finding one, I want to make sure that that theme is there, and I also want the grammar to be present in there. So if I'm looking for subjunctive, it should be in there, right? But it shouldn't be every single sentence with the subjunctive. It should be a natural place where it's not super obvious. The goal of what I'm looking for is something that's comprehensible to my students. I want them to understand what's there. Think of that I plus 1. I is what I can understand. And then plus 1 is that little bit more to kind of challenge them and keep them engaged cognitively, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of just jumping right into my story, I'm going to activate their prior knowledge with some sort of pre-activity. And this is really, really good to kind of set the scene for what we're about to be reading about. So I'll show photos, maybe to get them visualizing what we're about to be reading about. I'll pre-teach some really important vocabulary that I think are going to be key words for them to comprehend the story or to comprehend the resource. I'll ask them some personalized questions to get their involvement. The more I get them involved, the more comfortable they feel as they go through and read or listen to the resource. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out, all right, what do I want them to actually do with that resource? So I'm not going to have them just sit there and listen to me talk. I'm also not just going to have them read an article and say, okay, did you understand? I want to think of some interpretive activities to make sure that they're processing what they just read. So maybe it's sequencing. What happened in the story? Put these events in order. Maybe I'm categorizing things in the story. Maybe I'm identifying words or identifying some supporting details. And we're going to talk a little bit more next week about interpretive strategies. But I always want to make sure I'm thinking about what are they doing while they're reading or while they're listening. And then I'm going to follow it up with something post-interpretive. I'm never just going to end the resource and jump into the next stage. I want to make sure I'm doing something with it, some sort of interaction. So whether it's a conversation based on what we were just talking about, whether it's a mini debate involving what we were just talking about, something to make sure that it's wrapped up nicely. And I want this to be over the course of multiple lessons. I do not want this to be done in one day. I usually spend about a day and a half to 2 days just working with a resource so that I have everything I can possibly get out of it. I then move into the attention phase. And this phase is actually where I find that most of my PACE lessons kind of fall apart, so it's really an important stage. So afterwards, I want to highlight that grammar point because they shouldn't have noticed it right away. They might have noticed a word or two that you want them to discover later, but if every sentence doesn't have the grammar point you're looking for, they should have just been reading for comprehension. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to maybe put on the board, give them a separate copy, a color-coded or bolded section so that they see where you actually want them to look. Okay? If I just say look at the resource, they're going to notice all sorts of things. But if I guide them to say look here, look at these color-coded words, look at these bolded words, I want you to draw your attention to that. And then I'm going to ask them some specific questions to guide their exploration instead of saying go get them, see what you can figure out. Now I'm saying, well, what do you notice when this happens? Right? So what do you notice in common with these words? Specific questions that we're going to work on those questions. I'm going to give you a resource to kind of think about those. The attention phase doesn't take too long, 2 to 3 minutes, just so that you can draw their attention to it and so that they notice it. And then you move into the co-construction phase. So here's where you kind of are going to let them reflect, hypothesize, and create their own understandings of what they just noticed. So in the attention phase, you pointed out the grammar point you want them to see, and now it's their time to figure out, oh, what's going on here, right? So we're going to set it up as a dialogue between you and them. It's co-construction, not just construction, meaning that they're doing a lot of the work. We're kind of sitting back and letting them discover the rules, letting them discover and hypothesize and figure out what's going on with it. I do this in the target language because I think that there's a lot of value to that, because a lot of what I'm asking for is letters of the alphabet. Present, past, or future. Is this masculine or feminine? Is this singular or plural, right? Those sorts of words are cognates and words that we've been using a lot in class. I'm going to ask some direct questions. So I'm going to say, like, what happens when we have an AR verb? I'm going to say, is there anything you notice? For example, is there anything you notice when we talk in the LNA form versus the yo form? It's really important not to jump to just explaining the rules. If they say, oh, I noticed that the endings are opposites, you don't go, yes, and now let me explain the whole subjunctive. It's really hard to hold back, but you want to hold back until you get everything you can out of them, and that's really, really important. I let them be wrong sometimes so that I can kind of guide their thinking, and then that helps me plan for the future where I say, they noticed this, let me make sure that I draw attention to this in future lessons. And I'm going to redirect them. If they notice something wrong, I'm not going to say, no, that's wrong. I'm going to say, okay, that's interesting. Let's look at another example, see if that supports what you just said. Once I've gotten through everything and I feel like I've gotten everything I can out of them, I'm going to fill in the gaps with an explicit explanation. So maybe they missed the nosotros form. And let me just tell you what that is. Maybe you missed an irregular. Let me just tell you what that is. And then from there, the extension activities is what we're kind of used to. And that's taking what we just learned about in that grammar point and now coming up with additional activities that combine the grammar and the theme we're working with together so that they have that natural place together. So I'll think of more interpretive activities, so more articles or videos that are related to the theme. So if I'm talking about health, let me follow it up with more health-related things. Maybe some interpersonals where they have to use the grammar point that we just learned about to debate or do a role play. Maybe a presentational activity where they have to do a blog post using it or a quick write using it. And these are those follow-up activities to show that, hey, this grammar point doesn't just exist for no reason. It exists so we can do all of these things. So from here, I'm going to stop and let you kind of think a little bit, and we'll go into some examples in the next video.